Hey YouTube, it's Dimitri, and today we're going to talk about communication. We're going to talk about quants versus MBAs a little bit. One of the things that drives me nuts is that I always hear constantly, quants are great, quants are really smart, but they're terrible at communication. And MBAs, they're amazing at communication. They should be managers, they should be leaders, they have these great skills, and this is what's taught in an MBA. I think this is complete rubbish. I don't think this makes any sense at all. I think this is a huge stereotype that is spun off from the MBA side against the quants to show like a weakness. I guess this highlights a little bit kind of the contention or like the tension, I guess, in general. Just right, there's tension between quants and traditional finance professionals, which typically have a business background. But let's just dive on in here to the types of communication and why I don't agree with this. First off, there are three types of communication, and I think this is where the issue comes into play. Everybody thinks communication is just one thing, right? You either communicate well and people understand you, or you don't communicate well and people don't understand you. It's not that simple. There are three types of communication, though. So the first type of communication is common communication. I think this is where MBAs or business people excel. You're used to working in group projects, but in general, you can tell people exactly what you want to tell them in general terms. They understand quickly, they pick up, and then they can do something. A lot of times with quants, this isn't really the case. I don't know why, but common communication isn't as strong of a skill. I think a lot of it has to do with the fact that in school and in studying, we don't spend a lot of our time in groups, right? We spend a lot of our time actually in textbooks and doing math and reading and watching YouTube videos, right? We're trying to gain this very technical aspect. And this leads us to the second type of communication here, which is going to be the technical communication. So common communication is just like daily discussion, group talk, like interpersonal skills, being very happy and chipper and getting things done. Technical communication, I think, is something more challenging in the sense that it has to apply to a technical topic. So yes, this can apply to anybody, right? An MBA trying to explain to you a finance concept and going through the technicalities of how it's done, the products, how these things are put together. But also on the quant side, I think this is where we struggle significantly more. And the reason being is that on the technical side, I can explain something to another quant very easily. Like, this is, I don't know, like an F test. It tests multiple coefficients simultaneously. We're checking to see if they're different than zero. And while I say this, another quant or statistician will say, okay, makes complete sense. I get it. Let's move on. But there are a lot of people out there that don't understand this because they don't have the technical background. So being very good at technical communication a lot of times comes down to the point of reading your audience. So if you look at your audience and you know that it's a quant, you know they have that really solid stats background, you can easily communicate with them in technical terms. If you want to communicate with someone who is not very technical, who's not like an expert in this area, you might have to dumb things down, and this upsets people a lot of times. I know, I've dealt with it quite a bit. But yes, you have to dumb things down for different groups because you don't really know what their entire background is. And so you have to dumb it down to a level where you can explain it. But being able to communicate technical concepts to quants or other technical people as well as non-quants can be a challenge due to the amount of details that you need to know to understand the topic. So technical communication is the second one. And then the third one is language barrier. So I don't think a lot of people think about this either. In quantitative finance, and I'm sure other fields as well, the vast majority of people in this industry and in my field, they're not from America. English is not their first language. Most of my colleagues come from either India or from China. So their languages, while they do learn English, that's not their primary language. So one catch here too, for example, like my Indian colleagues, they usually learn the British English. So British English and American English, slightly different. When you say things in your language and your culture mean something. So for example, a lot of people in British English will say like, I'm going to post something, right? I'm going to post this letter. In America, we don't quite understand. What do you mean you're posting a letter? I don't get it. In America, we would say we are going to mail this letter. And so there's a lot of words that while yes, they exist in both versions of English, there can be some confusion. And then also on the language barrier here, you have accents. So if you have a Chinese accent or an Indian accent, or even like a European, like an Italian accent or like a Brazilian accent, a lot of times it's hard to overcome some of these barriers because it's just this difficulty in communicating, right? You're used to communicating in one way, in one language, and then you have to learn English when you come to America. And yes, your English might be like perfect grammarly, but you might have a bad accent. Or your accent might be perfect, but sometimes you just can't think of the word. Like, you know what you want to say, you communicate well. So again, your common communication's great, your technical communication's great, but you might struggle with that language barrier of being able to grasp the exact word that you're looking for. And so I think you can view this now as a pyramid, right? There's these 3 language communication styles, things that you need to work on. And at the very top of this pyramid would be like perfect communication. I don't think anybody has perfect communication, but it's like the ideal we're all working for. But in conclusion here, I don't think that one group or one person, has like an excellent communication skill and they like dominate the communication realm. I think a lot of times it just gets split up into categories. And in the quantitative side, right, it's a lot more challenging for most of us because you don't come from the US, and then you have a very deep technical understanding. And so then usually common communication kind of degrades a bit. So it's kind of hard to develop that skill because you're still focusing on the technical side. So anyways, those are the 3 types of communication. That's why I think quants and MBAs, I don't think one has a better communication style than the other, but I do think it's important for both sides to understand exactly what's happening and to try to improve your communication skills with the other side. So trying to bridge that gap. Anyways, thanks for watching. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. And as always, until next time.